I'm Shannon Vandermark, and this is the Happily Ever After Without Children podcast. You can find me on Instagram if you search for Happily Ever After podcast, or Facebook, the Happily Ever After Without Children podcast page. That is also where you can get access to the secret Facebook group under the same name. I'm now on Twitter as well. Happily Ever After Without Children podcast is the handle. You can also send me an email at reachhappilyeverafter@gmail.com. I would really like to hear from you if you have a story to tell about your adventures in finding your happy ending and how you got there. Welcome to the first full-length episode of the Happily Ever After Without Children podcast. I am so glad that you have subscribed, or if you found us and are giving us a listen for the first time. I'm so thrilled to be introducing this first episode from Paris, where I am visiting my husband for a couple of days because he is working over here. It's such a luxury to be able to just call the cat sitters, pack a bag, and just take the train from London to Paris. For the past few days, we've been cycling, picnicking, mooching about in museums, sweating on the metro, and pretty much eating entirely too much cheese. I'm just really grateful that we have the freedom to spend time and money like the dinks that we are. Dinks! Double income, no kids. We are most fortunate indeed. If you hear activity in the background, there's a playground right outside the window, and there's little French kids yelling in French accents at each other, throwing balls and chasing each other. So that is cute. There's nothing cuter than little French kids with little French accents, I think. Little kids with any accents are pretty cute. Recently, I had the opportunity to visit Belgian-born writer Lief in her gorgeous home in the southwest of England. If you listen very closely to my interview with Lief, you can hear the seagulls calling just outside the window, which was overlooking the sea. The walls in the room where we were sitting were painted a porcelain blue, which just made me feel all windswept and lovely. Lief had prepared us a generous lunch, poured us coffees, and piled biscuits on a plate that we carried up the narrow stairs to this cozy crow's nest type room where we had a chat about our lives without children. The connection between Lief and I began when she contacted me through the local support group I started in order to share details about the novel she wrote, Flow. Here are just a few bits from our incredibly honest chat. Have a listen.
Part of me has lost faith in my body, and there it is. It's not done what it was supposed to do. And that's a big one. That's a big one. And I hope, by God, that if I become seriously ill, that memory is not going to linger with me thinking, well, I won't be able to fight this because my body's rubbish, or you know what I mean? And that it does do, but you can't blame anyone for it. And us blaming ourselves for that makes things worse. Or you can miss certain parts of the trying.
Yeah.
The pissing on sticks even. The hope window that's then suddenly gone. We must be willing to let go of the life we've planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us.
Oh, is that a quote?
Yeah, that's Joseph Campbell. I think one of my last thoughts before I die will be about the babies I lost. I am sure of that. And about how sad that is.
And I quickly realized that neither of us are particularly down with the whole fairy tale ending mirage.
I don't really believe in happy endings. Maybe I'm a very cynical European, but I don't believe in happy endings. I believe sometimes things happily turn out for the best, and sometimes they turn out shit, and then you try again, and it goes up and down for most people. And I think more often than not, there isn't that happy ending. You know, things can turn happy or be happy for a while, and real life doesn't work like Disneyland. It doesn't, for no one.
Disneyland is kind of creepy anyway.
Exactly.
We covered a lot of ground, Lief and I, from letting friends look after us when we most need it, speaking openly of the pain that hits when you get the news that a close friend is expecting, and to Lief's struggle with endometriosis. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll check in with you on the other side. Hello, Lief.
Hi, Shannon.
Thank you for talking to me today.
You're very welcome.
This is a lovely view that we have. Can you set the scene where we are a little bit?
We are in St Ives, Cornwall, and we're overlooking the bay towards Hale there, outside the window. It's where I moved 4 years ago, after having lived in London for 20 years.
It is very peaceful.
It is, indeed.
And yeah, thank you for letting me come and visit.
Okay, you're welcome.
So I just wanted to talk to you a bit about kind of your story, and I know I found you through your book, Flow.
Sure.
So tell me.
Okay. I moved to England, to London, in 94. I was 34 then, to be with the man I'd fallen in love with, Pat. Children weren't that much on my mind. I think he knew before me that would probably become something I wanted before it was too late, which I've always appreciated. Then it didn't turn out to be that easy. I knew I suffered from endometriosis, which is a condition whereby the lining of the womb can spread into other parts of your abdomen, and it can also cause subfertility, basically. Some women fall pregnant with endometriosis. Other women have very minor endometriosis and struggle to fall pregnant or to remain pregnant. So I knew I had that, so I knew it could potentially be an issue. Then I did fall pregnant spontaneously when I was 36. Lost the pregnancy. By then, my husband being 10 years older than I am, we thought maybe we need to get some help if we still want to pursue this. And so we started the beginning of some fertility treatment, and then suddenly, coming back from one of these meetings, I was pregnant again lost the pregnancy, and by then it was choosing what was the best for me. That sounds very simple the way I say it, but God knows it wasn't. I was both in pain with the endometriosis and wanting that solved, and I was also in pain by then, really, really longing to have a child and wanting to pursue that further, but also knowing that fertility treatment would aggravate the endometriosis as well. So it was all very tricky. And then, never actually fell pregnant again after that second miscarriage. And had to gradually, over the years, learn to accept and embrace that fate.
How many years has it been since you got pregnant then the first time? How many years is this where are you on the journey in terms of?
I was 36 when I fell pregnant first, and I was 38 when I fell pregnant again, and I'm 58 now. But I had an early menopause, so actually I knew basically from my late 40s, I knew that it was going to be, well, not that I was still actively trying, but there was always a shimmer of hope that maybe I'll be one of these very late, whoops, it happened, and I would have very much liked that, I think. But yeah, it feels a long time ago now that the pain was so potent, if you get my drift. That's a long time ago now. I mean, it's all relative, I know, because it comes back in waves and in different ways. It can suddenly hit me again in a very different shape.
During that time, or in fact, even now, have you found any outlets for that grieving process? Have you? Yes.
I've always written. It hasn't always, until I wrote Flow, it didn't really find its way into my stories. But having children in my life, I know you're going to come on to this, but that I think helped me. It was one friend who said that I think it's important that you you're so good with kids, you're such a natural, you're a teacher. I wasn't a primary teacher, I was doing secondary education and adult education. But then around that time, when things were not looking like they were not going to work, I was approached by the school where I was teaching with the question, would you like to teach primary and even kindergarten and all that? And initially I thought, oh God, no, that's cruel. And then by saying yes, and embracing that and preparing for that, and I found it helped me in some odd way. Not that they were like all my kids, but there was something I clearly did get out of it, and it was bittersweet, I guess. Because at the same time, I loved. It was almost like it was a heightened happy medium, like being with kids, because I couldn't have them. It was constantly, and by then I was also I think able to talk about it, so some of the mums that I was closer to would know that this was a painful issue for me, and they would try to comfort me in their own way. Oh, you're a bit there, Mum, when they're at school, and initially I detested, quotes like that, but then in the end I thought they mean well, and it's true. I pour into that way more, I guess, than I would have done if I would have had my own. I don't know. Yeah.
During the years that you were trying, was it ever difficult to be around children? Like, did you turn away from children at any point, or babies or pregnant women?
No. Pregnant women, yeah.
So how did you react to pregnant women?
They were everywhere. And whereas before I don't think I ever noticed. It wasn't until it wasn't that easy anymore to fall pregnant, and it wasn't happening, that suddenly children became, I wouldn't say alien, but they became like a super desired thing, and everyone else seemed to have this thing that I so very much wanted, and I felt entitled. I felt I had to have it, and why wasn't it happening for me? It happened later. It coincided with me not being able to fall pregnant and to remain pregnant.
Did you have any interactions with any good friends telling you that they were pregnant? That was...
Oh, sure, often. Yeah, often.
Did it cause trouble in your friendships?
No, and actually they were all very, very good at trying to do their best, not avoiding the subject. I remember one friend of mine in Belgium had just had a baby, and I visited her, and she was so sweet, and I just had another miscarriage, and she said, I'm just going to go and do some shopping. Can you look after him? And sorry, she just knew oh God. She knew I needed a big cry. Sorry. Don't know where this comes from. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, she knew I needed time with her baby and be there on my own with the baby, and I was. It was good. It was good, and it was hard, and it was good, but again I was still very young, and I thought, next time I'll be here with my baby and we'll laugh about this. And I think with hindsight it makes the memory harder, because it never did happen, Yeah,
I understand that. That's a good friend to see that.
Absolutely, and she was never, and none of my friends were never like, I don't know, inappropriately or overprotective, or they were just being them and trying to cater for my pain without overdoing it. And I think, that's what you call good friends, just feeling how they can help you, and then, for God's sake, and also giving me a kick up the bum, like, get on with it, and if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, then tough luck. And it's what you need. It really is what you need. You don't want people pussyfooting. You don't want society pussyfooting around, I guess, any special need. You just want it recognized and and spoken about, but you don't want special terms, I think. My friend from Belgium had been trying, as I had been for many years, to become pregnant, and she'd come over, you know, I'd get an email suddenly. She said, actually, I think it's pre-email day. So she kind of rang me and she said, I'm coming over for New Year's Eve. And I said, that's great. Me and my husband, we've booked the train and we're coming over. And as soon as they arrived, and I gave them some coffee and they sat down, and they had this, by now for me, so telltale smile and this kind of smug look on their face. And I thought, oh shit, she's going to tell me. And it sounds awful for anyone who hasn't been where we have. And I thought, she's going to say they're expecting a baby. And so my best actressy reaction came out, and I said, I'm so happy for you. And let me just get some more coffee. And I ran to the kitchen and I fell in my husband's arms. What's the matter? What's the matter? No, she's pregnant. And I think if only she'd known that this would have been difficult for me, and she wouldn't have done it, I think, or she would have warned me. I'm by no means was this calculated or smugness beyond belief, like, oh look, we finally got there. It was an oversight, and I think it tends to happen when people are happy. They smother other people in their happiness. It's just a very normal reflex. I remember I did it when I first, fell pregnant, and I couldn't understand that. How could someone not be happy for me? So, but that was hard. That was very hard. Especially because she was staying over, and I. Had to see her bloom in happy, contented pregnancy glow.
Glowing all over the place.
Glowing all over the place, spilling the glow everywhere.
Get your glow off my couch.
Exactly. Yeah. I think even if you're going through something tricky and difficult, you want to try at least to be the best person you can be, especially because you're feeling so very many ambivalent things, like not just envious of people who have what you want, but annoyed with them and frustrated and owed, and it's unfair, and it's almost like you want to say, oh, you better be careful because things can still go wrong. I remember not saying it but thinking it. And so I think I tried very, very hard to be my better self and not to act upon it. And I think in the end that helped me. You don't always want to give in to your real, nasty voice. It's not always fruitful to do that, I think.
Yeah, I definitely struggle to do it ever, but the reason why I sometimes end up thinking, why wasn't I more honest about how that completely destroyed me for the whole day, week, month? And I think if I'd been more honest with these things along the way, then here I am 10 years later from when all of this has started with me, and people still are surprised that it was so terrible. And I just think, I wasn't honest with you, because how can you not see that this has completely changed my life?
Mm-hmm. See, it's tricky also, because you don't want pity and you don't want people to overdoing. It's what I was saying about this good friend of mine who felt exactly what was needed in a given situation. When my sisters sometimes were, that didn't feel right either. I wanted, it was almost like the only good, real, honest conversations I could have with people who were going through the same thing. And I think that's the case in any walk of life. I think if you're going through something incredibly painful, the only other people who are going to understand it and you can have frank and uncensored discussions with are people who go through the same thing. No?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do I know what it's like to suddenly hear that you've got cancer, or that your partner is unfaithful or has left you? I mean, you go, oh, poor you, and can I do anything? But you don't know what that feels like. You can empathize all you like, but you don't know. And a minute later, you return back to your own reality and thank your lucky stars that it's not you.
Yeah, I think I'm still we're all works in progress, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think I'm trying to find the difference between speaking up because that's my truth and that's my story and that's how I'm feeling at the time, and not wanting anything from them, but just being honest with how that situation makes me feel. I had a really, because my sister got pregnant and I got pregnant at the same time, and we're gonna have we had the same due date, and then I lost mine, and then I just said, you need to just keep telling me everything, and she said, well, you need to keep telling me everything, and we just decided to be really honest without detracting from what the other person was going through. And that was really hard, but also I knew if I said, it's really annoying, it's so painful hearing you tell me about when everything's okay at the doctor. She wasn't taking that as I wanted anything bad to happen to her. It was my experience that just happened to be very closely influenced by her experience. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. But that meant that there was such a solid base of trust between you and love, I guess, and connection, if you're allowed to do that. And that she wouldn't see any agendas, because there weren't any agendas. But
yeah.
With how many people can you do that? We're so constantly trying to get it right and to say the right thing, and often at the cost of being genuine, and then we're left to lick our wounds and, oh God, why can't I? Especially when things go on for a while and you are fed up with your own whiny, complaining voice. Sure. And your own bloody sadness and your own unfulfilled hopes, it becomes wearing. And you know, if it becomes wearing for yourself, what the heck must it be like for people around you? They don't even dare to tell you. So there is that too, that yeah. You almost want to be stopped as well. And I think it sounds like we have partners who are able to do that, in all honesty, and say, oh, you know, just stop it now here, you know, I don't mean the treatment in it, but I mean just, there is more than that. And I think it's about regaining perspective at every level of this journey. There need to be moments where you regain perspective, or it drags you away into something very, very dark. And I guess it happens with a lot of women, as we know. But if you go on certain platforms, there is nothing but that. And if there was one thing I hated about the whole trying to become pregnant thing and fertility thing, is that life was on hold.
Yes.
I was living from menstruation to menstruation. There was a good window, there was a hope window, and then there was a shit window. It was so all-consuming, and that is incredibly tiring.
Also, it destroys your sex life.
It does, absolutely.
Because men, although you might be led to believe they are all machines, they're not.
No.
And it doesn't so happen that within the whatever it is 36-hour window, he might not want to do it twice a day.
No, exactly.
And then for us caused a lot of problems, because then I get angry, which is weirdly not a turn on.
Mm-hmm. No, don't tell me about it.
Somehow it doesn't do wonders for romance.
I know. It somehow, despite it's such an unnatural setting. But we can say until we're green, it's not supposed to be like that. It is like that for so many women, and how to navigate that and how to come out the other end or work with it without it destroying your self-confidence, without it destroying your relationship, without it destroying your relationship you have with other pregnant women, with children. It's tricky. And I think we're all trying very, very hard to get that right. But how can you not hope when you hope? It's so alien to me when I go to these forums now and you know, women are patting each other on the back. Oh, it'll be all right and it can still happen. And I always feel like being the angry stepmom's voice saying like, well, it might not. Thinking you can't take hope away from people. We've been there. But I don't think I ever was like that. I don't think I ever was like, shh, don't tell me about the fact that it might not happen. On the contrary, I wanted scenarios where it didn't happen so I could prepare for that eventuality. That's why I started to write the book. Now, to put it really blunt, what am I doing here? That's not an uncommon thought for anyone who thinks, what are you doing here? And I think that's kind of, in a way, taken out of your hands if you've got children, because you leave them behind and you keep carrying on in a way in them. But what I meant with that is not a 24/7 consolation. God knows that there's many depressed people with children, or people committing suicide and having children. It's not the be all and end all. When they tell you that when you can't conceive, you think it is the be all and end all. But on another level, leaving behind the legacy of what you created is kind of the circle round and why we are here. Even if you're not religious, you kind of realize, then what has my life been? Why am I surviving and trying to find projects that are fulfilling just to pass the time until what? Until I go, and then what? That has been it. So there is definitely that, but I also don't think that is completely resolved. That issue is resolved when you have children, and I don't think it would have been resolved for me if I had had children. I can tell myself that if only I'd had kids, then maybe my journey would have had made more sense. I believe I'm too gloomy a person for that. I don't think, sometimes that would have been my be all and end all, and then other times it wouldn't have been enough. I wouldn't have stopped being me with all my wandering and searching, and sometimes be feeling desperate about the human condition, about living and learning how to live and then having to bloody die. I think I would always feel that, whether I'd have kids or not. And I think it would, on one level, even make it worse, because it would mean that they hadn't been enough, if you get what I mean.
I do. Yeah, I did have the legacy existential crisis. But I think, and I would say that I was going through that a couple of years ago, just really, it was really bearing down on me. And then I started talking to my parents about it, and everyone who I talked to who had kids said, well, my kids are my legacy. And then it got me further and further, like, oh, now I need to do something, and I'm not doing anything, and I'm not anything I do, it's not going to be enough. Why did I get saddled with this? I'm meant for some bigger purpose, and I don't know what it is. I'm not finding it. And I think now I'm at a different point where I feel a real freedom with it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't have to save up for my kids to go through school.
Yeah.
Or if we become homeless, which hopefully we don't, but it's just us and we'll be fine. We can go stay on somebody's couch. We don't have a family that if I decide to cash in my career and I'm not earning anything, I don't have any kids that are going to suffer. I don't have to stay in a job.
Absolutely. Those afterthoughts, once you're ready, come washing in as well, and they're just as real and just as potent and just as true that, to say it with a cliche, like within every loss comes a new gain, and I know it doesn't feel like something we've gained, but it's a lucky side product of not having children is definitely more financial independence. Also, we both know that in our best case scenario, we would have had a healthy, wonderful child. We would, as a couple, have been the best possible parent. We would have had some fights every now and then, but overall it would have been a good thing. We don't know. We could have had, severely debilitated children or relationships or tests put upon us to come with that. We would have dealt with that and have to do so. I think we've got to also come away as unwanted childless women, come away from that Disney scenario of having children and realizing it never is the be all and end all. But then that's easier said than done if something isn't a choice, and if something is, you're denied something, you're bound to put higher value upon it. I think the biggest regret in all, and it's funny, I think it's an odd one, my biggest regret is that I haven't been able to become another person, a selfless person, a person whose needs are not their own. You get that a little bit when you've got pets, and it's almost more important that my dog feels well and I'll feed the cat before I feed me, but that doesn't bear any resemblance to what it feels like to have the responsibility for another life. And that I do regret, that I don't know that other Lief I could have been. The mother me, I don't know that. And I think I would have probably done a good job. And you never know that. And I remember one friend saying that to me, and I think, you think so?
What did your friend say to you?
I think you would have been a great mum. And I think a lot of people don't dare to tell because they think that's really painful. It's not painful. That helps. I wanted her to repeat it. You really think so? She said, I'm sure. But you would have also still been a pain in the ass, and you still would have been selfish and a drama queen, and that wouldn't have changed for just by having a kid or more than one. Somehow that's important. On some level that's important, that I could have been a mum, and I would have been potentially a good mum. But that it wasn't to be, and that's what it has become now. Something that could have been, but it's not. Like, we could have lived in that house there, but unfortunately our bid wasn't accepted, so we're in this one, and actually we've made this one pretty cozy.
Is that really similar, do you think?
Almost.
Really?
Now, almost. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm going a little bit far out of the bend here, but almost, because you can't afford to have that at the forefront of your mind for so many years after you've moved on.
We were talking about making other people not feel awkward when they ask you if you're a mother. And have you changed when you were going through it and somebody would ask you, was there a right or wrong way to react?
It was the hardest thing. I would shy away from any situation where I might be asked that question, and I would kind of preempt it until my oldest sister, said to me, "Just say, unfortunately, I haven't." And I thought, my God, that's the Rosetta Stone. How could I have been so stupid? And I was so grateful that she hinted that, and I thought, why didn't I think of that? And then the tone in which you said that would then prompt further question, or it would be, change the subject please, because I would say, no, unfortunately not, oh, unfortunately not, and then you could kind of offer more of your story or not.
Depending on your mood.
Depending on your mood, depending who you were talking to.
Yes, because I feel sometimes I'm either exhausted about talking about it, or I'm just bored of talking about it. Because actually, when you're feeling okay about it, like you're saying, it's just a house that we didn't get. I do feel like that sometimes. It's not as often, but when you're feeling like that, you don't need to launch into the whole story. Or it could be like you're saying, the person you're speaking with.
You know, when you're so glib about it, part of you is probably also feeling guilty towards your previous self. You know what I mean? You know, my previous self would be so hurt about me comparing it with a blimmin' house. And yet I want to tell previous Lief, it has to get to that point, because otherwise there wouldn't be anything left of me. What kind of a sad ass would I be if I, at my age, would still constantly fill the conversation as we are doing now? But you know what I mean? If I was doing this on a daily basis, I'd need a straitjacket, I think.
Also, it's just exhausting.
It is exhausting. And I think one of the good things about once you realize, I mean, in my case, it also meant being pain-free, but that's another story. But once you realize it's not to be, and you have to channel your energy into other things, you just suddenly get so much energy back. It's just suddenly... I was running a theatre club for kids around the time I realized it wasn't going to happen, and then one of my friends made me godmother to her child, and that was incredibly emotional, but it was also a really good thing. It was all kind of drawing me into another type of legacy, if you like. So yeah, that was good. But I guess you need to allow yourself to at some point be a bit kind to yourself and let yourself off the hook, and that means making a decision to, and you do that together, I guess, to say stop, enough.
I think that's what you were saying, be a bit kinder to yourself is a huge thing for me at the moment. And I think there's such a tangible luxury once I stop beating myself up about it. Because I'll have free time, and I'll, for the longest time, be thinking I could have been filling all this time with, raising a child, and now I'm just cleaning the house, and then I decide to lay down and take a nap or read a book or produce a podcast, and instead of feeling bad about that, you switch to feeling really grateful, and then it's like the best, most decadent dessert ever. Mm-hmm. And I actually was thinking to myself, I can do this every day.
Yeah.
And it feels really like I shouldn't be doing it.
But, I know.
But why?
We're good at guilt, right?
Yeah,
we're good at these guilt trips.
But nobody is standing above me telling me to feel that way. It's completely internal. But
that is also what makes it difficult, Shannon. If you fall in the pattern of having a child and meeting up with other women, and you're in your NCT group or whatever they're all called, and you suddenly are part of a community. We are, I'm afraid, not part of a community. And it is that hollow freedom that you're describing now, which we can interpret as very liberating, but more often than not, we have to try very hard, much harder, to shape our life and to make it into something successful, because we haven't had that first take off. We had our kids. Often it is like that. You've had your kids and they're off to school, and they're off to university. Now I can do something for myself, blah, blah, blah. That's all within the line of the expectation. We miss that. We're not embedded by the other moms holding our shoulders, and we're not united with them. That's a lonely feeling, but lonely is also liberating. It's not just lonely, it's not just dark, it's also you can fill it with other stuff. It's I think.
Yeah, that's a good metaphor. I was kind of, when you were saying that and using your hands to gesture, I was thinking like, a lot of women, or like if you become a mother, a lot of women, it's like rolling out like cookie dough, and like all of the structure of motherhood is like a cookie cutter. And there, you know what you're going to be. You're going to be put in the oven. You're going to turn into it, and you're going to be iced. And then there's an assembly line that makes sense, that we all understand, that is part of the oldest story structure in the world, is birth and death.
And we miss that, and that's bloody hard. In previous societies, we would have been weird or witches or
burnt at the stake, surely.
Yeah, well. Perhaps, yeah.
I mean, because that's right. I think you'd be branded as barren.
There is, absolutely. That is.
And so instead
there
of
definitely is a stigma. There is plenty of cultures still nowadays where it's stigmatized.
I think it still is.
There is no blueprint, no structure for us in the same way as there is. I remember an interview with a Dutch writer who never had kids, and she was in her 50s when she gave the interview, and she said there's something odd about when you haven't got children. Your age is not marked in the same way, not that your age doesn't show, by God I wish it was true, but you're not on the map of aging because your kids are out of primary school and then they're into secondary and they go to university. We haven't those markers in our life. And can we move on to the book now then? Yeah. Well, Flo tells the story of a friendship between two women, Emma and Ayana, who meet at prenatal yoga. Emma has been struggling to fall and to remain pregnant, and she's about to miscarry again when they meet.
Is that a spoiler alert?
No, when they meet for the first time, because that's actually the first page tells you that. Emma suffers from endometriosis, and on top of that she has an unusual shaped uterus. It's called a bicornuate uterus, so basically it's heart-shaped. Emma is in a relationship with Raf, trying for a baby alternately unites them and divides them, as it tends to do when falling pregnant is tricky. There comes a point in the book where, as a couple, they decide to have one final try, and if that does not result in a baby, they will try and find happiness without children. But that final try turns out to be very testing on many levels. Then, in an attempt to strengthen the relationship or to take off the pressure, if you like, the couple accept an invitation to go on holiday to Sardinia together with Emma's friend Ayana and her husband and her 2 children. Then a tragic accident happens, which is not only to test the relationship between Emma and Raf, but also the relationship between the 2 women. I guess in the end it's a novel about friendship and relationships, and about how men and women often fail to, as I said, synchronize their feelings when things get messy. A story about love and longing and loss, and ultimately about survival without, I hope, that dreaded forced happy ending that so often put me off fiction about these subjects, the nauseating forced happy endings in literature and in film. Because you were also going to ask me about what is cathartic. Well, that was cathartic. I thought it was such a cliche when people said it might be cathartic, and I thought, oh, shut up, what do you know? And yet they were right. And by digging back into it, I relived it, and I could choose myself where I would fictionalize it, where I would make it even worse than what I experienced, where I would make the dialogue between the couple even more vitriolic, and that it would then really become a page turner. I was also convinced there'll be an audience for it. I mean, this is such a common theme, and in a way also such a taboo. To talk about envious being envious of and even having bad thoughts about other people's pregnancies because you can't have yours, but also human, and fictionalizing it and writing about it was most definitely cathartic. There is no reason and no rhyme and why you've got your bloody factor Leiden and why I had my heart-shaped womb and endometriosis and why there isn't. But you know what? Worse things happen than that, and you can't have this from anyone else. We can say that to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Come on in. It's great in here in this club.
It's a good club.
But it's incredibly difficult to find the members.
Yeah.
It's a very secret club.
Yeah.
I don't know what the knock is.
Yeah, but that makes it more exciting, doesn't it? Our secret club. Yeah. It's funny. I don't think, Shannon, I've ever spoken to anyone about it before at such length and in such depth and even crying. I didn't think I could still cry about this. It just goes to show it is important that we talk about it together and help each other through that and make it clear that there is a path for us and there's no stigma attached and there's no guilt attached. It's just unfortunate and the story, next subject.
I think it was really interesting what you said, though, that nobody will really understand unless they've gone through it. And that is why it's so important to talk about it, because you don't know who living next door to you has gone through
Absolutely.
it. And it could be that the person living next door to you has a sister who can't leave her house because she's going through it and she would just love somebody to talk to.
Mm.
Well, thank you so much.
You're
for
very
opening
welcome.
up and having the conversation with me.
You're very welcome. I hope it comes out okay, and I hope indeed it contributes to a better awareness and more openness about all this.
Yeah, I think it will.
I do.
Thank you for listening. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so now. And to find out more about Lief and her novel Flow, find us on Facebook, Instagram, and or Twitter by searching for Happily Ever After Without Children podcast. If you have a story to tell and would like to be a guest on the program, please email me at reachhappilyeverafter@gmail.com. And do share details of this podcast with your network of friends and family. You really never know who might be suffering in silence and could really use a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. This is your host, Shannon Vandermark, and I thank you for listening.